Well, welcome. I'm Electra Porzel. I am the director of the Language of Consciousness Institute. And one of the fun things that I get to do every week is lead a discussion group about one of Charles Eisenstein's next old stories, new stories. And the reason I like to do it is because I love to entertain different perspectives and different ways that the people who come to the call have. And we not only entertain what the old story, how it's impacted the earth and how we live together, but then we play with the new story and say, what would it be like if? And today we talked a lot about, well, what's our personal role in this? So the old story is this. This is the old story and the new story that we discussed this week. And I want to tell you, the reason I tell you this stuff is because I hope you get excited about talking about it with somebody, because it is in the looking at different perspectives and different ways of viewing the world that we expand our neural networks. So we have more options and we have more chances to respond instead of react in what may be historic ways for ourselves. So that's kind of why I'm doing this. But the old story is this. The world outside the human is deterministic or random. In other words, somebody already decided that's how it's going to be, or it's chance. It has no innate intelligence or order. Life evolved essentially by chemical accident. And we talked about how that's a real justification for doing what you ever damn well please, and not paying attention to the environment or the impact of your actions. You know, what pops in mind is, well, I want to shoot some buffalo. So they killed all the buffalo and they destroyed, this has destroyed the food source for the Native Americans and destroyed actually the environment of the West. But so the justification is, hey, it's all by random anyway, so we can do whatever we want. And besides, we're humans and we know best, or we're men and we know best. And that's not really worked real well. I think there's obvious that we've developed a lot of stuff, but we've also destroyed a lot of stuff. There's a movement well, I've seen it in science and in economics, in caring for the land, environmental work, where they're starting to look at how the indigenous peoples, whether they be of Australia or the Sami of, Northern Europe, or American Indians, or in the African African lands, that now they're going like, okay, how did the indigenous people care for this? And when they start paying attention to those ways, when they are still living indigenous people to teach them, they start to learn, oh, well, that's a way to make sure there's not major wildfires, fires. One of the things, if you look at PBS, has a thing called Changing Planet, and it's season 2, episode 1, talks about Australia, California, and I think it's Kenya, and how the recognition of and the study of the native ways will make it possible for these lands to survive the drought that's happening, and allow for new food sources, allow for more animals to have viable, so we don't have the extinction rate, So there's people that are coming to look, saying the old way of doing this and thinking, we thought this up, so this must be we're going to pretend it's true, is no longer the way to go if you want to make sure that the land survives, the plants survive, the species survive. We have to look beyond our old thinking. So that brings us to the new story. Now, the new story this is it: intelligence, order, and life are basic properties of the universe. The world is full of beings, that's with an uppercase B, and of being. That's not acting or doing, but just being. Order and complexity emerge spontaneously out of chaos. The conversations that arose really started with people talking about how they have relationships with other species, like the trees on their land or the plants in their home or the animals that they care for, that there's a sentient relationship where they can understand what the plant needs, or the plant communicates with them, or the animal communicates with them, and they have a relationship with it. When you choose that, when you say, I know what this land needs, but you're not saying, I know, I figured out mentally, you're going like, I have a relationship with this land. I have a relationship with these plants, with these animals. And you start honoring what information you're getting. Now, that's going to necessitate that the individual has been paying attention to their own sentient registers. Sentient registers are things like emotions rising, energy moving through you. When we write the templates of the language of creation, it may be words popping in your head. When you start paying attention to what your sentient registers are, you gain an assurity and an assurance of not only what is life enhancing for you and life generating, which is how we write the templates, but you start to trust the information you're getting. I used to be a massage therapist, an energy worker, craniosacral therapist, and I always trusted the bodies that were in front of on the table. They would inform me, go here first, go here, do this. And when I trusted that, which I grew to do that all the time, I could apply the skills that I knew and the techniques that I knew, but the direction was coming from the individual's body or from their spirit. It's essential that we start paying attention to our own sentience. So we start having different ways of knowing beyond the mental mind. And then the mental mind gets more and more information, more and more, which expands your neural networks. The neural networks not being just in your head brain, but in your solar plexus, we call it, your gut brain. And you have a knowing and an ease of movement in communication with other species and even with other people that you don't have otherwise. So that's one of the things that we do to practice this larger knowing of what is this intelligence that exists in the universe that is beyond our little mental mind, and what we have learned historically. We all know that there were belief systems in different parts of our own bringing up that aren't true that people go like, oh, that's not true anymore. And we don't know, we have no idea what belief systems we have now that really somebody just thought up and they acted upon it as true. Part of it is what you have to do to be successful. What do you have to live a full life? There are belief systems out there that say, well, if you don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars, then you're just, nothing. Or you don't have a full life. Whereas there are people who live on $400, $500 a month who have very full and interesting lives. It's how we come to life and how we know what is ours to do. And also how these other species, these other intelligences convey to us what is needed for their survival, for the survival of the planet. And there's a myopic view, navel gazing, by both humanity about what is best for this planet. And sometimes it just has to do with the individual's thinking versus a connection with the land, versus a connection with the animals and the plants, to say, what does this species need? What does our species need on a larger level that doesn't have to do with war, with killing, with power and control? Well, there is this connection, this being, connection with others, thinking of the larger whole versus what do I need? Think, what does the larger group need? How do I act so that more people, children, are taken care of, that they're fed, that they're safe, that they get an education, they get medical care? That would be my larger responsibility, to make sure that happens for future generations. What does it matter to? What is important to open up to? And it's different viewpoints, different perspectives. I really believe that if we do not honor the whole of humanity, moving our policies and the way we work with people towards that, we're going to, the species will not survive. I want to make sure that the generations coming, my grandchildren's grandchildren, will have a full and healthy life on a full and healthy planet, really being all of what they came here to be. Now, it seems like if you listen to Pam Gregory, the next 5 years are critical in this shifting from the old story to the new story, to the new way of functioning on the earth. And it's worth paying attention to that now, because things are changing. We all know that the old way of going to work, the old way of acting with one another is kind of, one, it's not working, and two, we're having a flare-up of all sorts of extreme behaviors, of shootings, of people who come to the door, of kids who get in your car, the wrong car. It's totally ridiculous. So when I think of change, I think of a pendulum, and it goes off one here, and eventually it works down to an even point. Well, I think we're at one of these high arcs, but we have to look at each other and say, what is it mine to do to help this society, this town, this county, and the people within it have everything they need in order to thrive? And it's going to mean changes in policies on all sorts of different levels, changes in how each of us acts with the other. And how will we do that? We were discussing that. We were saying, well, maybe somebody will produce a movie that really gets people's attention. And a lot of us came down to, if each of us does what is ours to do, to be in our truth about how we see our role in this new story, we will have the impact that we came here to have. And we don't know what that is. Tantra Mott says, next 3 months are critical, pay attention, allow your larger self, your larger being to come in and be her or him. I don't think they're a her or him, but be them. And then you have a larger field that you're working with, and you walk around it, and people are impacted by that, even if you don't say anything. One of the things that we started discussing at the very end is the different view of life, a death. And I belong to a group called Dominher, which is a spiritual echo community in Italy. And every October, they say, okay, it's time to think about your death. Do you have all the documents you need? Have you talked to everybody in your life about what you want for your death? Have you, started cleaning out the house? And it's deciding how we want ourselves honored after our death, and also not to be a burden to others. But then people came up with all sorts of ways that they've decided that would be better than the coffin within the concrete vault in the ground. Some people, cremation. Some people say there's a compost sometimes group. What are they called? I don't know. Anyway, it's like composting. Green burials. There are all sorts of different ways that at least my generation is looking at burial of the body. But there's also that, how do you honor an individual as they're dying? And how do you support the family in that process? And one of the women in the group is like a death doula, which means that she also is a registered nurse. So she can go and provide both the spiritual side and the energetic side and the physical care of an individual. And you might say, well, why are we getting to death when we're looking at trying to create new life? I think every aspect we get to look at differently, and we should entertain it. Nothing's written in stone. If you and I get into these conversations, we start to learn, like it's like the five blind man around the elephant. If you change position and sense, you thought the elephant was a big, like a tree trunk, but no, it's got this wiggly thing, and no, it's got this big wall you have to face. About any subject matter, you become more aware of different perspectives, and you can act differently then when you come to a choice point or a way of being, that how to act or how to be. All these different viewpoints will inform you. And in that flexibility, in that looking at different ways to be, different ways to act, in order to be who you came here to be, let's say that, you will shift the world. And you may shift it for a friend who watches you in that action, for a grandchild or child who watches you do that. And then they shift how they are. And they understand that they can shift out of old ideas and old ways of being into new ways that can better serve not just the individual, but the family, the entire community, and then humanity. And I really believe that's the most important thing to do. Now, if you're, I encourage you, take these stories, the old story, the new story, and have the discussion with your friends about it, with your family. See what people's thoughts are about this. And if you'd like to join us in discussion, go to our website, which is the Language of Consciousness Institute, which is www.loc-institute.com, and go to our events page, and you can look up the Charles Eisenstein April conversations. And for only $12, you can join us for all the conversations of the month. And we have the same series coming up in May, different topics every time. This all comes from a blog that Charles Eisenstein wrote in January on Substack. So anyway, thank you very much for letting me share my thoughts with you. Have a wonderful week and enjoy this solstice. The eclipse was today, April 20th. Take good care.